But what's really important is faith. Faith is essential for life. Everyone has faith in something. They have faith in a deity, or they have faith in science, or they have faith in their self, or they have faith in other people, or they're just completely miserable because they have no faith in anything. And that's a scary place to be. When looking online for a definition for faith, I found quite a few meanings. And a few from the current Merriam-Webster. Faith is allegiance or duty, or allegiance to duty or a person. It's interesting. Belief or trust in and loyalty to God. Okay? Faith. Firm belief in something for which there is no proof. That's an interesting definition. The fourth one I got from Merriam-Webster that's current is something that is believed especially with strong conviction. The generic definition, if you just Google it, define faith, it came up with this: complete trust or confidence in someone or something. I kind of like that one. I really do. It's a complete trust or confidence in someone or something. Of course, the 1828 Webster's Dictionary had to get more complicated. Imagine that. Part of it read this way: belief, the assent of the mind to the truth of what is declared by another, resting on his authority or veracity without other evidence. The judgment that what another states or testifies is the truth. That's a short portion of it. Okay? But there's a couple things that I thought was interesting. It says without other evidence. Okay? And the last part, the judgment that what another states or testifies is the truth. The judgment that what another states or testifies is the truth. Having faith. This morning our sermon is entitled Just a Touch. Just a touch. And we have all three of the synoptic gospels that are giving us a view of this account today. It's really important, as usual, you should be used to this with me by now, that there's a progression that's leading up to all of this. And the first fill in the blank is Jesus' nonstop ministry. Jesus had recently calmed a storm. So they were going across the sea, the storm came up, the disciples thought they were going to die, and Jesus got up and said, "Quiet, be still," and the storm was just calm. Pastor Wheats, which was Sarah and I's first pastor together as a married couple, I'll never forget, I've got it written in my Bible downstairs. He said when he looked it up, what he discovered was the translation could have easily said, instead of "quiet, be still," it could have said, "Shut up and sit down." That's what he said to the storm. Thought that was kind of blunt. After the storm, then they got to land, and then Jesus took a demon-possessed man and completely delivered him. Cast the demons out and amazed the people, but scared the people. They asked Jesus to leave. They get across the sea again, and now there's a huge crowd waiting for Jesus to get to the shore. They were all there to see him. And one of the people that was there was a man by the name of Jairus. Jairus was a leader in the synagogue. But he was desperate. He was desperate because he had a 12-year-old daughter that was dying. Jesus agreed to go with Jairus, and his disciples, they started to go, and the crowd started pressing in. And Jairus wasn't the only desperate person there. In the midst of this nonstop ministry happening in Jesus' life, Jesus was taking care of people, and he's going back and forth, and now he's following Jairus to heal his daughter, and the crowds are pressing in, and people are shoulder to shoulder, and it's getting tight. And we look at Mark chapter 5, verses 22 to 24. It says this: Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. So we see this picture. The crowd is all around, and they're wanting to get close to Jesus. They want to talk, they want to see, they want to touch. And then in the midst of all this, Jesus stops. All of this commotion going on around, and Jesus stops. And we get to verse number 30, and it says this: At once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" You see, the people crowding against you, his disciples answered, and yet you can ask, "Who touched me?" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Jesus is just walking along, following Jairus, and he stops and, "Whoa, wait a minute. Who touched me?" You know, Jesus has been bouncing around from teaching here and there and healing people, delivering people, calming the storm. Now he's following this synagogue leader, Jairus, to heal his daughter, and he stops. And here's the place that breaks my heart and scares me at the same time. We find out that the desperate press in. Here's our classic, verse 25. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet, instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed. This woman had tried everything she could to take care of herself. She did what she could. Then she heard about him. She heard about him. Jesus, the one, the miracle worker. He's a miracle worker. He's a healer. And what she found out was he was not only a miracle worker, he was not only a healer, he was the healer. He was the one. This woman had been bleeding for 12 years, and it was only getting worse. Now, I will tell you, I've been married for almost 30 years, come next year. I've got 7 daughters. I have a little bit of an idea of what it is for a woman to be on her period. Okay? Just saying. I'm thankful to God that I do not have the personal experience of this process, but I've been around it. And I know what it is for Sarah to have given birth 10 times and to have a lot of blood loss that can come with it. And it will cause weakness, and it can cause lightheadedness. It can cause many other things that are just uncomfortable. This woman had been bleeding for 12 years. I hope that grips your heart a little bit. When you get down to the reality of just glossing over a story and you think about the woman. She has suffered many things at the hands of doctors. She's spent all she had. I cannot imagine how weak she was, how lightheaded she could have been. And yet she pressed through the crowd just to touch his garment, hoping in desperation, I'll be healed. Do you get a grasp of the desperation that's going through her heart, going through her mind, going through her body? The desperation. She was out of time, she was out of ideas, and she was out of energy. This is like a last chance. Except there's this man. If I can get to him, I'll be healed. There's some things that I want us to consider. Number one, the crowd required effort. She wasn't able to discreetly just kind of walk up and touch his clothes. There's a crowd pressing in around that she had to get through. She's already weak. This is expending a lot more energy. And this one is probably the one, once again, I'm so grateful to be going through this. I'm glad God led me to do this. Because this is something that most people aren't going to catch. She was prohibited because she was unclean. She had been bleeding for 12 years. If a woman was bleeding like that, she was unclean, not allowed to be around other people. If she touched them, she would make them unclean. If they touched her, they would be unclean. Being unclean in this time period was not a good thing. It happened, and it wasn't necessarily a huge deal, but at the same time, you didn't want to be around it. So to think about this, wow. But then there was another side of this. When I was reading my commentary, it kind of struck me as like, oh. So she was unclean, but the crowd gave her cover. She was able to somewhat incognito come in and just kind of blend in with the crowd just to get a touch of the garment. I thought, like, oh, that's kind of a cool idea. And then this one. Jesus' lack of consent. I don't think Jesus would have not healed her. Okay? Double negative, right? I think Jesus would have, if she would have walked up and said, Jesus, would you heal me? What do you think Jesus' response would have been? Absolutely. But there's something significant about this account, a lot of things significant, that we need to take in mind, or keep in mind. She said, if I can just touch his garment. And she did, and Jesus sensed power go out from him without him necessarily turning and saying, be healed. It was her faith that activated his power. I used to do synthetic floors for Sarah's dad, and we use a two-component system. You put one component in, and it's just fine. And you take another component, and it's just fine. They're liquids, not a big deal. But when you put them together and you mix them together, give it a little bit of time, and it becomes a solid. You have the component A, but then you have component B, which is the activator. Okay? The other thing is, please wear a gas mask, because even with a gas mask, I ended up high. Whoa, it is strong stuff. Way too strong. But you've got Jesus' power, his omnipotent power. You had her faith that activated that. And it came to her and healed her immediately. I just think it's such an amazing picture. It wasn't... Jesus' lack of consent is not a negative thing. It's her faith was a catalyst. It was so very important, an activating agent for the healing. Power flowed from him to her. And why? I believe because she was desperate. Jesus, you're it. You're my last. And why would I say that? Luke 8:43. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. Au contraire, mon frère. She found one that did heal her. Keep in mind, Luke is known as a doctor. So he likely would have... There's a reason why he put that there in his account. Such an amazing thing. The crowd would have made it more difficult to get to Jesus. But even being unclean, she was willing to take that chance, making everyone else unclean that she came in contact with, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes. And she did. And she was healed immediately. And this is where Jesus stops. We just covered that. And I love this because he was en route to minister to someone else already. But he paused. He stopped for a moment and he healed her. We're going to pick up with verse 32 and we're going to talk about the woman testifies. The woman testifies. Verse 32. But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it, who touched him. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Wow. A couple of things that I just want to quickly note. First one, we've talked about faith. Her faith was a vital component to all this happening. But the other one that I think was so very, very important was humility. I think her humility also, in the midst of it, was very important. Something else that we can think about, maybe some of you have always seen this way. But when it says that she fell down trembling with fear, and a couple of translations say that she was a frightened woman, I have read this and saw that, okay, she had fear before Jesus. That she fell down trembling and in fear at Jesus' feet. But considering everything else as we're looking at these different things, could it possibly be that her fear was not of Jesus but of the crowd? Jesus had just healed her. I don't necessarily think that she was afraid because she stole a healing from Jesus. She didn't steal anything. But if the crowd now found out that she was bleeding and unclean, the crowd now could have turned on her. So it's just an interesting thought that I've never thought of before. But as I've looked at it more closely, it's just like one of those things of, no wonder she was afraid. She wasn't afraid of Jesus. Now, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty confident. The crowd could have very, very easily turned on her. But you see, this woman was desperate. That's not disputable. It's very clear from what we have. She was very desperate. And in her desperation, she chose, as an unclean woman, to press through this crowd so that she could touch Jesus. And Jesus, with people all around, knew that when she touched his clothes, not his skin, not his body, by the way, just let that sink in again. It wasn't that he felt her touch. He felt his power go out from him, which astounds me. And then bringing her to attention of everyone, the woman tells the whole truth. She gives testimony of what had just happened. So what about us? I want to consider needs for today. Unfortunately, many times we need desperation before we make changes in life. And it's really too bad. Whether that be in relationships, whether that be in our physical health, or our spiritual health, or our finances. Just take those four things and think about it for just a minute. How often do we want to make changes in any of those four areas unless we absolutely have to? Not very often. I'll be just fine. It's okay. I don't need to change my eating habits. I'll be just fine. Until the heart attack almost killed me. Now it's time to change my diet. Or my blood pressure is completely out of control and it's just, whoop, okay, this is bad. You don't change what you eat, you will die. It's a big deal. How about our spiritual health? Everything just falls around us. Everything's crumbling. And desperation, I tell you, unfortunately, desperation is what it takes for most people spiritually to come to Jesus. It's you get to that place where it's just like, I'm lost. You know you're lost. And it's just like, okay, I need Jesus. Relationships. I have a sign in my office, a little piece of paper that I've printed off. If you've read the bathroom ads, you have read it before over time. It says, marriage tune-ups today help reduce marriage overhauls later. Why? Most of us wait for the overhaul. I'm fine. We'll be fine. By the way, if you ever ask a married couple to rate their marriage on a scale of 1 to 10, about 8 or 9 times out of 10, especially if you get them separate for just a moment, say, wife, how's your marriage going? It's about a 4, maybe 5. Ask the husband, oh, it's about a 7 or 8. Man, we're almost a 9. Same marriage. That's just a perspective. Trust me, I've asked the question hundreds of times. Okay? I've got a little bit of experience on that one. Why is it that we wait till we're desperate to change things? Financially? Well, no, I'll be just fine. Until you're almost bankrupt. Until you say, okay, maybe I actually do need a budget. Okay? Been there. It's unfortunate. Sometimes we need that as a reminder, or sometimes a slap in the face, to actually analyze where we're doing well and where we're lacking. This is why I try to remind us. Doing evaluations on a regular basis is a good thing. Looking at just taking the time. So just to throw this in for fun, not in my notes, it's one of the primary purposes Jesus gave us a Sabbath for, on a weekly basis, is to do an evaluation on how we're doing here. And when we do that evaluation here, I got news for you. He's able to speak to us and says, hey, you need to fix this. Hey, you're doing great here. Keep going. God isn't always about the negative. He's not always about the don'ts. God's also a God of do's. Okay? Is that me? No. Okay. Whew. Made me nervous. So, here's what I can remind us. He gives us answers. Even through a classic like the parable, or not the parable, the woman with the issue of blood. So what do we need to do today? What can we learn from this? Number one, to seek Jesus before we're desperate. Seek Him. This woman sought after Jesus. There wasn't anything going to hold her back. She had enough things that were hindering her that she wasn't going to let anything stop her. Oh my. Matthew 7 says this, "Ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks the door will be opened." I want to see if any of this kind of comes together for you. Luke chapter 11. "So I say to you, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks the door will be open." A little repetitive, right? But wait, there's more. Deuteronomy 4:29. "But if you seek the Lord your God, you will find Him if you seek Him with all your heart and your soul." Now here's what I like. The Old Testament gave it a little bit more richness. Because you'll find Him if you seek Him with all your heart and all your soul. Jeremiah, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." You see, we're not only invited to seek God, we're instructed to. With all of our heart, all of our mind, all of our soul. So, we're not only invited to seek Him, we are instructed to, and we're also supposed to trust Him. This is where faith comes in. Having faith and trusting Him is essential to being a Christian. Hebrews 11:1 and then 6. "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance of what we do not see." I love the word assurance. It's not a wishful thinking. That's not hope. Okay? Hope can be either wishful thinking or an assurance. This to me is an assurance. And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him. Once again, this isn't a flippant, "Oh yeah, I believe in God," and then we go do whatever we want to do with life. No, there's an earnestness, there's a zeal here. Looking at another set of very familiar verses, I'll go through this pretty quickly. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." Real quick, most of your Bibles will say in verse number 6, in all your ways acknowledge Him. If you look at that more closely, and you look at the Hebrew there, neither one of them are really very good. In all your ways acknowledge Him. I really don't like that word acknowledge at all. Submit to Him, I think, is better. But if you look at the Hebrew, it's to know Him. In all your ways, know Him. There's something more deep there that I think that we need to realize. It's not just, "Oh yeah, God's a part of my life and He'll make my path straight." In order for your path to be made straight, you need to know Him. So there's a depth there that I think is really missing. What else do we need for today? Something that this woman did that she really wasn't planning on doing at that moment, that I believe we need for today very desperately, and that is we need to testify of Him. We need to have a testimony on our lips. Worship team, you can come on up. This woman needed the encouragement of Jesus to step up and tell the crowd what He had just done for her. I appreciate the push that we get from the Apostle Peter in 1 Peter 3. But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give the reason for the hope. Remember, this is not a hope that's wishful thinking. This is an assured hope. The hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. The woman in the crowd had a need. She wasn't the only one who had the need. Jairus had the need too. But Jesus took a moment, took the time to take care of her. This morning, if you have a need, I would like to encourage you to reach out. Reach out to Him, whether that's right where you stand or if you come up front and pray up here. You're more than welcome to. Let's pray. Father, I thank you. I thank you that you are good. I ask that you would help us